With both Disney and Marvel already panicking over Ironheart episodes 1 through 3 and the ongoing ratings disaster that it is, there is also way too much focus on the LGBTQ community by the fandom in a negative manner. And it just needs to go away, I think, for a healthy story to grow, and for Riri to really share her limelight with...
Natalie AI thing seems utterly preposterous and ridiculous, and even for an MCU show, I'm finding it to be a little bit of a bridge too far to go. The Heist crew, all lame. Every single one of them, all lame.
And so in this, I'm not sure what they're meant to be, because this character isn't to be confused with Slog.
Slug, our hacker extraordinaire.
Who is also the exact opposite in the same show. I'm really confused.
It deserves your attention. Ironheart deserves your attention. That's how I knew. I was like, oh, they are desperate to get people to watch this show. After I did my reaction, I kept getting, hey, it wasn't that bad. I just watched it. Hey, I just watched the first 3 episodes. It wasn't that bad.
Ironheart might be one of the worst executed ideas ever in the MCU, because under all that garbage was actually potential.
Yeah, and it's like the real Tony Stark, it's like back somehow, and there's like a moment where she's flying through and he's like, who is that? And she's like, I'm Ironheart, Mr. Stark. And he's like, I like that girl. And then he like goes to do something else. Like that would be like the level of something that I think would possibly happen.
Ironheart is back, this time going to an uncomfortable place for viewers.
Ironheart is the biggest L of Marvel of all time. The reactions are just spectacular. Supposedly he's smarter than Tony Stark, bites an electric wire, sells her soul to gain magic powers, uses new powers to steal. What did the writers mean by this? Smoke detector beeps.
I can understand why she's frustrated. That's how I feel watching her interviews.
How do you feel about the impact that she's having on young Black girls? And I'm going to be completely honest, on Black women.
You know, this is yet another area that's getting vibrant. It's getting full in the way that it should be.
Ironheart is practically unwatchable.
This show basically keyed their car, their mom, and in their bowl of cereal in the morning.
They have Dominique Thorne, you know, going out there talking about DEI, LGBTQ rights, and how there's no agenda there, and she continues to do so. But the other thing is that they also had Robert Downey Jr., and they had him roll out and really kind of prop the show up and prop the character of Riri Williams up above Tony Stark.
The update on Ironheart's PR troubles now centers on one detail, buried deep in Robert Downey Jr.'s Avengers Doomsday contract, a clause that gave Marvel the right to call him into promotional campaigns for other MCU projects. That clause is what first brought him into the Ironheart rollout. But now, after weeks of tension, Downey has made it clear the clause won't be stretched any further. Ironheart's launch followed a pattern we've seen across multiple Disney properties. Fantastic Four, Snow White, The Acolyte, where early backlash triggered high-profile appearances from trusted legacy names. The hope was to smooth over concerns and redirect the conversation. But this time, the tactic misfired. Downey's praise for the series and its lead, Dominique Thorne, was meant to reframe Riri Williams as a worthy successor to Tony Stark. Instead, it came across to many fans as overly scripted, sparking online speculation that he was promoting out of obligation rather than enthusiasm. Behind the scenes, Marvel pushed for stronger public defenses of the show. But Downey refused, arguing that such messaging would only deepen the divide between the studio and its fan base. Now he's stepping back. His future promotional work will stick strictly to Doomsday, leaving Ironheart to stand or fall on its own. For Marvel, it's a rare and very public signal that the old playbook may no longer work, even with their most trusted star. Buried inside Robert Downey Jr.'s Avengers Doomsday contract was a single clause that would later become the flashpoint for Marvel's latest PR headache. It wasn't about creative control, salary negotiations, or box office bonuses. It was a promotional participation clause, a small but powerful line giving Marvel the right to tap Downey for press tours on select MCU projects, even ones where he didn't appear on screen. For years, clauses like this were insurance policies for the studio. If a series or film looked like it might underperform, they could roll out a trusted face from Marvel's golden era and instantly command attention. This approach had worked in the past, often in subtle ways. A quick cameo at a red carpet, a surprise late-night show appearance, a friendly nod to the new lead in interviews. But Ironheart wasn't going to be subtle. From the moment early test screenings came back lukewarm,
we already know that those out there like Dominique Thorne, the main actress of the show who plays Riri Williams, after really going after fans and really going after the critics, it's only making matters worse for both Disney and Marvel.
Marvel knew they were dealing with a show in need of heavy reinforcement. The decision was made. Activate Downey's claws and position him as the public bridge between Tony Stark's legacy and Riri Williams' future. The hope was that his endorsement would neutralize Backlash and elevate the character in the eyes of hesitant fans. The move fit a pattern Disney had leaned on heavily in recent years. Fantastic Four's rocky post-reshoot buzz, bring in legacy actors to assure the audience. Snow White's PR storms, roll out key cast for media tours to calm the conversation. Even the Acolyte saw familiar Star Wars names drop into interviews to lend credibility. The formula was familiar, but Ironheart would prove it was far from foolproof. Downey's first wave of appearances checked every box on the studio's list. Compliment the lead actress, underline her character's genius, and frame her as a worthy heir to the Stark mantle. But this wasn't a background mention in a long interview. It was the core of the campaign. And that's where the cracks began to show. Because while Marvel thought the clause was their safety net, Downey saw it as a leash, and he wasn't about to let it tighten any further. The tension only deepened once the campaign hit the public, and the reaction was not what Disney expected. When the Ironheart press push finally hit, Marvel expected a surge of goodwill. What they got instead was a social media autopsy. Fans clipped every Robert Downey Jr. interview, replayed every line, and compared it to his past Marvel press runs. The difference was impossible to miss. Gone was the spontaneous wit, the natural enthusiasm, the sense that he was speaking from the heart. In its place was a polished, almost mechanical delivery that had corporate briefing written all over it. The strategy was supposed to be simple. RDJ praises Dominique Thorne, reaffirms Riri Williams as the next great tech mind of the MCU, and draws a clean emotional line from Iron Man to Ironheart. Instead, the repetition of talking points made it obvious that this was more than casual support. It was a studio-mandated push. Audiences didn't just shrug it off, they pushed back. Comments filled with phrases like, "he's reading a script," and "this doesn't sound like him," started to dominate the conversation. Even neutral viewers began to wonder why Marvel was leaning so heavily on Downey to sell the series, rather than letting the show speak for itself. And this wasn't a one-off appearance that could be brushed aside. Downey was on multiple major platforms, morning shows, entertainment podcasts, fan convention panels, all carrying the same message. What should have been an asset quickly became a talking point for why the show felt inauthentic. Behind the scenes, insiders say Downey flagged the problem early.
The thing about Ironheart is that yes, we do know that the last 3 episodes will be debuting tonight, by the way, really fulfilling the show for season 1, and I highly doubt that there's going to be a season 2, based on the ratings disaster that it is, based on the critics really calling the show out for what it is.
He'd warned that pushing the Riri as Tony's replacement narrative without letting the character stand on her own would invite backlash. Now, watching it play out exactly as predicted, he began quietly resisting certain talking points, steering conversations toward broader MCU themes, rather than staying locked on Ironheart. Marvel noticed, and didn't like it. To them, this wasn't the time for improvisation. They wanted the full endorsement, the kind that could be turned into clean marketing clips and news headlines. But Downey's hesitation was now public, and it set the stage for a direct confrontation with Disney leadership. That confrontation would happen sooner than anyone expected, and it would turn a simmering disagreement into a full-blown standoff. The breaking point came in the form of a hastily arranged video conference. Robert Downey Jr., Bob Iger, and Kevin Feige. No PR buffers, no assistants, just the 3 key figures on screen. The official agenda? Align messaging for Ironheart's ongoing promotion. The real purpose? To push Downey into giving the kind of public defense Marvel thought could flip the narrative. From the start, the tone was tense. Iger laid out the stakes bluntly. Ironheart's numbers were weak, online sentiment was slipping, and the studio needed Downey's full weight behind the series. Feige followed up by explaining that the criticism wasn't just about story or pacing. It had taken on unfair undertones that Marvel felt needed to be addressed head-on. The request was clear. They wanted Downey to go on record condemning the most vocal segments of Backlash and framing Riri Williams as a vital part of the MCU's future. In their view, a strong statement from him could steady the ship, much like legacy cast appearances had been used to rescue the PR for Fantastic Four and Snow White. But Downey wasn't convinced. He reminded them that his relationship with Marvel fans was built on authenticity, not scripted damage control. Labeling criticism as bad faith across the board, he warned, would risk alienating the very audience they were trying to keep engaged. To him, the better path was to highlight Dominique Thorne's talent and Riri's unique qualities without dragging the conversation into a divisive arena. That suggestion didn't land. Insiders say Iger pressed harder, pointing out that Downey's promotional participation was contractually required under his Avengers Doomsday deal. Feige backed him, framing it as a team effort to protect the MCU's next phase. But Downey pushed back just as firmly. This wasn't about refusing to help, it was about refusing to read a script that didn't reflect his own perspective. The call ended without a compromise, but the damage was done. Marvel had counted on him to be the centerpiece of their recovery strategy. Now, instead of a unified front, they were staring at a very public example of their top talent pushing back. And while that dispute played out behind closed doors, Ironheart's performance in the real world was only getting worse. By the time the heated call wrapped, the numbers coming in for Ironheart were already confirming Robert Downey Jr.'s warnings.
Certain is that this is a show that nobody asked for. This is also a show that is based on a comic back in 2016 that was canceled, quite frankly. That's also another fact that people have to realize. But focusing on Disney CEO Bob Iger and Kevin Feige, they are desperately trying to oversell this show to a degree that we have never seen before.
The show hadn't just stumbled out of the gate, it was sliding further each week, and Disney wasn't talking about it publicly. Normally, a Marvel premiere comes with a wave of press releases touting record-breaking hours, massive subscriber engagement, and global rankings on streaming charts. This time, silence. No flashy graphics, no celebratory tweets, no biggest debut of the year headlines. Industry trackers noticed immediately, and that absence told its own story. Leaked figures painted a clear picture. Viewership dropped sharply after the first 2 episodes, with retention falling below internal targets. On social media, even fans who had been open-minded going in were voicing frustration, not over Riri Williams as a concept, but over the way the character was being presented. The better than Tony Stark positioning wasn't winning converts, it was hardening skepticism. Merchandise was another red flag. Retail partners had stocked up ahead of the premiere, expecting the usual MCU bump. Instead, Ironheart-branded gear sat unsold, with early sell-through rates trailing far behind comparable Marvel debuts. For Disney's consumer products division, this was a sign that the character wasn't breaking through to the mainstream audience. Dominique Thorne's media appearances, meant to humanize the role, sometimes deepened the divide. Her responses to criticism often framed it as rooted in bias, which sparked heated debates online and reinforced the perception that Marvel was avoiding discussion of the show's pacing, tone, or storytelling choices. From a strategic standpoint, the trajectory was worrying. The longer Ironheart underperformed, the more it became a symbol of Marvel's recent struggles, a project with big ambitions, heavy marketing, and a visible disconnect between studio intent and audience reception. And for RDJ, watching all this unfold, it only validated his decision to resist being the face of a campaign that was spiraling. That's when Disney decided to pull out its most familiar and most controversial crisis playbook. With Ironheart's numbers sinking and the RDJ standoff unresolved, Disney moved to a familiar emergency tactic, the last-minute injection of a high-profile character revealed to try and reignite interest. It's a move they've used before. When Fantastic Four test screenings drew mixed feedback, when Snow White's pre-release buzz turned negative, when the Acolyte's reception split the Star Wars base. The formula is simple. Drop a legacy character or major villain into the marketing cycle. Hope the headlines overshadow the criticism and ride the surge of curiosity. For Ironheart, that ace card was Mephisto, a name Marvel fans have been speculating about since WandaVision. And to sweeten the reveal, the casting would go to Sacha Baron Cohen, an actor with both mainstream recognition and the kind of offbeat energy that could grab social media attention. On paper, it looked like a solid play. In practice, the choice raised more questions than excitement. Instead of debuting Mephisto in a dark, high-stakes corner of the MCU, think Doctor Strange, Blade, or even Midnight Suns, Marvel was dropping him into a series already struggling with audience buy-in. For longtime fans, it felt less like a carefully built story moment and more like a desperate ratings ploy. That perception only intensified when insiders confirmed that the reveal was timed specifically to counteract Ironheart's early drop-off. This approach wasn't without risk.
So let's get into this. Now, one thing about Bob Iger is that we know that I, along with many others out there, like to call him Bob Liger, because all this guy does is lie to the audience, he lies to the shareholders, he lies to anybody out there, in order to really kind of string them along into the following year in hopes that they will stay around, whether it's shareholders or customers. And we already know that Disney Plus is a failing platform.
When you burn a big-name villain introduction in a project that isn't connecting, you weaken their impact for future appearances. It's a one-time headline that doesn't solve the underlying problem. Viewers aren't sticking around because the core narrative isn't resonating. The gamble didn't pay off. While Mephisto's name trended briefly, it failed to change Ironheart's trajectory. Within days, the conversation had shifted right back to low engagement, uneven writing, and the awkward PR surrounding RDJ's involvement. And for Downey, watching Marvel try to paper over creative missteps with cameo hype only reinforced his decision to step back. Because if the studio's plan for fixing deeper issues was to throw legacy names at them, this wouldn't be the last project caught in the same cycle. And behind that cycle, a much bigger problem inside Disney was starting to come into focus. By the time Ironheart's rescue attempts fizzled, it was clear this wasn't just a Marvel problem. It was part of a much larger storm brewing inside Disney. Across nearly every major division, the same symptoms were appearing: stalled growth, shrinking audiences, and a growing gap between corporate strategy and fan expectations. Bob Iger's return as CEO in late 2022 was meant to stabilize the company. Instead, he inherited, and in some cases doubled down on, a slate of risky, high-cost projects that weren't delivering. The Marvels underperformed, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny missed its financial targets, Snow White's remake faced months of negative press before release, and Star Wars: The Acolyte became one of the most polarizing shows in Lucasfilm's history. Disney Plus, once the crown jewel of the company's streaming ambitions, had also lost its early momentum. Subscriber growth had plateaued, and the billions poured into original content weren't generating the returns Wall Street expected. In response, Iger launched aggressive cost-cutting measures, including mass layoffs that hit Pixar, Marvel Studios, Lucasfilm, and even Disney's theme parks. While billed as strategic restructuring, insiders noted that many of the cuts were hitting creative and marketing teams, the very people responsible for keeping these franchises relevant. At the same time, the influence of major institutional shareholders like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street became more visible. Industry chatter suggested these firms were pushing for certain optics and priorities that didn't always align with audience tastes, leading to projects that felt more like corporate mandates than organic storytelling. Whether the intent was cultural positioning or simply risk management, the result was the same: a perception that Disney was chasing checklists rather than compelling narratives. Ironheart became a microcosm of all these issues. A high-investment project with a built-in legacy connection, backed by one of Marvel's most bankable stars, still couldn't escape the gravitational pull of weak storytelling and awkward marketing. And when even Robert Downey Jr., the MCU's most reliable ambassador, and was drawing lines, it signaled a deeper problem. The old fix-it playbook no longer worked.
It is a failing business model for, of course, Disney. You know, we already know that Tony Gilroy admitted to this, the guy who created the Andor series, both Season 1 and Season 2. Disney just doesn't have the amount of money that they have anymore to create all of these shows. However, interestingly enough, with the Ironheart ratings disaster only getting worse for those at Disney and Marvel.
For Downey, the bigger picture wasn't just a backdrop. It was the reason he decided to set clear boundaries on what he would and wouldn't do for Marvel moving forward. For Robert Downey Jr., the Ironheart drama wasn't just about one series. It was about the direction Marvel and Disney were taking as a whole. The broader corporate turbulence, the formulaic legacy rescue strategy, and the mounting disconnect between the studio and its audience were all part of the equation. By the time the dust settled on his tense call with Bob Iger and Kevin Feige, Downey had decided he wasn't going to let his name be pulled into another project's crisis without limits. According to insiders, his message to Marvel was direct. he would fulfill the promotional obligations explicitly tied to Avengers Doomsday. But any attempt to extend that involvement into unrelated series would be off the table unless the content genuinely aligned with his own standards. No scripted talking points designed to silence criticism. No framing that risked alienating the same fan base that had supported him for over a decade. It wasn't a blanket refusal to support new characters. Downey reportedly has no personal issue with Dominique Thorne or the Riri Williams role. His frustration was with the way Marvel tried to position her as Tony Stark's immediate replacement without giving audiences time or narrative depth to make that connection organically. In his view, forcing the handoff and expecting fans to embrace it overnight was setting both the character and the actress up for unnecessary backlash. What made this boundary different was that it was public in effect, if not in statement. The absence of Downey's full-throated endorsement became part of the story, reinforcing the perception that even Marvel's most loyal star was unwilling to stand behind every decision unconditionally. For a company accustomed to total unity from its top-tier talent, that was a serious warning sign. And in Hollywood, a move like this has ripple effects. Other legacy actors and high-profile MCU names were watching. If Downey could draw a line, so could they. Which means Marvel's long-standing safety net, the ability to bring in fan-favorite veterans to stabilize a shaky project, may no longer be a guarantee. And with that, the question hanging over Marvel wasn't just about Ironheart anymore. It was about the future of its entire interconnected universe. Ironheart's rocky launch, the Mephisto gamble, and Robert Downey Jr.'s quiet but unmistakable pushback have all crystallized one thing. Marvel's once unshakable dominance is now facing a real stress test.
As CEO, it is 100% my responsibility to remain direct and transparent, and that doesn't just go for our customers, it goes for our shareholders as well. With our latest project, Ironheart, I want to be very truthful to our core customer base that our latest series is a wide success regardless of what you have been hearing in the trades.
What was once a franchise with near-total audience loyalty is now navigating a market where even its most trusted stars are weighing their participation against creative and strategic concerns. For Disney, this raises hard questions. Can the studio still launch new heroes without leaning on the old guard? Can they rebuild audience trust after a string of divisive releases? And perhaps most urgently, will shareholders have the patience for long-term course corrections when every underperforming project chips away at both revenue and brand strength? The Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars era is supposed to be the MCU's next peak, the culmination of years of interconnected storytelling. But if Marvel's creative engine keeps stalling, those tentpoles could end up being remembered less as triumphant comebacks and more as desperate attempts to recapture a fading formula. Meanwhile, Ironheart's fate hangs in a strange limbo. Even with its production completed and a multi-million-dollar marketing budget already spent, Disney's subdued promotion has fueled speculation about whether they'll quietly scale back future seasons or even sideline the character until a better reception feels possible. The absence of major post-release fanfare suggests that, at least for now, the studio's energy is shifting to its next round of high-stakes releases. As for Robert Downey Jr., his decision to draw the line has become a subtle but significant turning point in Marvel's behind-the-scenes politics. His choice signaled to fans and fellow actors alike that even the MCU's biggest players can, and will, walk away from narratives they can't fully endorse. And in an industry that thrives on perception, that alone may be as damaging as any box office miss. Because if the audience believes Marvel's most iconic star has lost faith in the company's direction, regaining that trust could take far longer, and far more than just another cameo. The next moves Marvel and Disney make will tell us everything about whether this was just a stumble or the start of a much larger unraveling. If you think this is the last time Marvel's biggest stars push back, think again. The next one could shock everyone. I'll break that down in the next video, so stick around.